Join SMPTE for a change.
Hello, friends. Welcome to today's SMPTE-EBU webcast. It is a collaborative effort between SMPTE and EBU, and the topic today is an update on the SMPTE-EBU EuroVOX tool that they've been working on. The goal is for every citizen to be able to consume media in their native language and in real time. I am your host, Joel Welch. I'm with Macklin LLC. Thank you for joining us. I do have a couple of slides that I need to go through for some housekeeping, and I'll get right to that because you didn't come here to listen to me. So let me just get over here. I'd like to thank AJA Video Systems for their ongoing support of SMPTE education. They've been sponsors for just many, many years, well over a decade. So thank you, AJA. And if you're off to IBC, not only safe travels, but go visit these folks and say thank you for supporting industry education and specifically SMPTE education. The SMPTE Media Technology Summit is coming up soon. It is the 16th through the 19th of October at the in Hollywood. You have this QR code that you probably see all over the place. Click on that. It'll bring you to the registration page. It will be in the PDF for those of you that give us feedback about today's webcast. SMPTE does offer private courses. I don't know if everybody knows that, but if you'd like your company or your department, if you have more than 12 people, get in touch with education@smpt.org. and organize the private session specifically for your group. That way you can address the specific questions that your group may have. Speaking of learning, SMPTE wants to know your priority learning needs, and they have put together a very brief, I think it's 3-question survey that asks you to provide your feedback so that they know what you need to learn, and they will put it on the list for consideration for either a webcast or for a virtual course to develop and offer to you. Very important that they hear from you. Of course, SMPTE membership is at the core of SMPTE. The community, the networking opportunities, the benefits. I could go on and on and on about the benefits of SMPTE membership, and to be honest, it's quite a deal. It's quite a value for your membership. You not only have access to things that non-members do not, but you have opportunities that non-members do not. There is another QR code. It will be in the PDF. And I'm not going to go to this slide right yet, but I'm going to cue it up for our guest speaker, or one of our guest speakers, and I'd like to bring them online now. With me today, I have Maya Davidovich. Maya is the Director of Education for SMPTE. Thank you for being here, Maya.
Thank you for hosting, Joe.
We have Benjamin Poor. Benjamin is the Senior Project Manager. He tells me it's because of his age. I don't believe that. But he's with the EBU, and he is Senior Project Manager. Our first person speaking is going to be Maya. And I didn't say I was going to ask you to give you a little background when we prepped, but Maya, I wonder if you could just take a couple of minutes and tell us how you found your way here and what you do, and Ben will do the same thing with you if that's okay.
So Ben and I were talking. Actually, SMPTE-EBU have been talking about this collaboration for a while now, and when we got this opportunity to talk today, I was ready to come in and help people understand what we're doing. So if that's okay, I will just say a couple of words about the background for this project. We in the team, SMPTE Education team, are continuously monitoring the learning needs of the membership and the public. And one of the codes that Joel shared just previously is one of the ways how we collect that information. So if you have anything to tell us, please use that code to send us information and feedback on what learning needs you have and how can SMPTE help you develop your professional skills, your team skills, and work towards the betterment of the industry altogether. Now, we collect this information in formal and informal channels. So this is one of the formal channels, but we also welcome you to approach us in an informal way. At the end of each year, we collect everything that we have received and talk to our leadership and membership about what actions we should take and which projects we should go ahead with and launch. So this was one of such projects, and basically we have the grounds for this is we have received an increased number of requests for delivery of training to various broadcaster companies all over the world. We have organized training sessions recently in Canada, in the US, in Europe, Australia, the Middle East. All of that training is mainly IP education, which is extremely interesting and popular now. Of course, we all know that everybody's leaning towards IP and application of ST2110 in their facilities, but to get there is not that easy. So we have private trainings that we organize. We also have public trainings that we organize through our website. We invite people to register when they have a need for professional development. And looking at the fact that everybody comes from different regions of the world, from different countries, we face the fact that the broadcast industry is leaning heavily towards IP and implementation of SMPTE ST2110 standard. We have decided to try and help the society be more global. We have decided to start this collaboration with EBU and launch the tool that will enable people from various regions of the world to consume this knowledge in their own language. So why are we doing that? According to some studies from the training industry, comprehension increases when learners can give their complete attention to the content in their native language without first having to mentally translate it, because that's the process that usually happens into their first language. The learner is focused on the subject matter directly and not on the interpretation process, which is then done by the tool that we are going to present to you today. Misinterpretation of the learning material can cause to various problems like lower productivity, loss of revenue, and then more seriously, even injury if that's applicable to the specific job role. So at the same time, as we were looking at these facts, we received a generous offer from the EBU to test this tool. And we then met with Ben and we got access to the tool, my colleague Audrey and I, and we tested it, and it looked really, really fabulous to us. So we said this is really the good thing for our members to get access to. So this tool is specifically used in EBU so members can translate various news feeds into their own languages in a short amount of time. It only requires a couple of steps. It is not complicated at all, and you will see how it works later when Ben shows us the tool. Audrey and I have seen the value. We have started translating our ST2110 class. We have started translating it into French and Spanish. We have several elements of each class, and we have started translating videos, narrations, and the quizzes. And our understanding is that this can easily be applied to all our educational resources, not just virtual classes. So this is a long-term goal for us. There's still many things to consider and check because this is literally a trial phase, but we do hope to enable our members to have access to this tool early next year. This is only the beginning of collaboration with the EBU. Hopefully there will be many more projects that we can work together on that will be valuable to the membership and the industry. And also SMPTE wants to establish collaboration with other organizations. For example, we are now working with the University of South California and their Entertainment Technology Center, and we are together in collaboration developing a virtual course that focuses on use of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the media industry. So that is going to be published early next year, hopefully as well, if all goes well. And we're also planning to start a mentoring program next year if everything goes well. And this translation tool can also be handy for that purpose as well. Then we can match people from various countries, all over the world, despite the potential language barrier. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to make the introduction. And I thank Ben for being here and presenting today this wonderful tool to our audience. And I want to hand it over to you now, Ben.
Thank you, Maya, as well. And absolutely, I love questions. They keep my brain working. Maya introduced it really well, I think. I'm really excited to have this collaboration in play. I think a bit of history about EuroVOX, Maya mentioned it a little bit. We really wanted to open up some exciting new tools, or at least a couple of years ago now, for AI-based translation, transcription, and voice synthesis as well. The purposes of really making media multilingual. So as Maya mentioned, all of our organizations are global. They serve many different languages, many different people. I just checked the stats for the EBU. For those who don't know, of course, it's a membership organization of public service broadcasters in the European area. It goes all the way from Finland to Spain, from Ireland to Greece. I think I'm right in saying, if I get the right figures, we have 112 members whose audiences speak 166 languages. They actually provide content in 166 different languages, with a potential audience of over 1 billion people. So the real challenge there to help our members, and that's really what our function is to help our members leverage these new class of tools to help them reach those audiences better, to help them serve those audiences better. So really our first use case was in news content. Because really that's often the focus of public service broadcasting, is reliable and trusted news content, and public service broadcasters in Europe are the most trusted sources of news, and that's obviously vitally important, more so than ever now. So really we work with our members to try and help them use these tools effectively, being able to translate news content into multiple different languages. One thing, I don't want to go into too much detail before we start, but one of the things I would highlight is the paradigm we always follow is it's AI assistive. So humans should always be in the loop, especially for vital content like news, but not only education as well. It's very important to get the right message across, as Maya says, for safety's sake. So having humans in the loop is vitally important. So it's not just, should we say, leveraging one or two interesting transcription or translation tools. It's finding the right ways to really use that effectively for broadcasters to make sure that message is right at the end, to make sure that it's verified, it's right cleared, it's valid to be broadcast, or whatever needs to be done. So really the collaboration has been a super interesting new domain for me, especially in terms of education. It's the same challenge that we have in EBU. We also help our members with educational material. So really the scope of how we can use these tools has really widened collaboration with SMPTE. I'm very grateful for them to get involved. I'm grateful for my colleague Hans Hoffman as well, that kind of launched this with David Grindle. And it's a really exciting thing to keep on going with. And I'm hoping we can really collaborate further on this project. And we're certainly open to other collaborations, but I think this one is going to be a particularly vital one in the future. What I want to do was just give more detail, I guess, on why we arrived at the EuroVOX project, but really what it's for. And I mentioned that a little bit just then. Our strapline, our mission statement is that every citizen should be able to consume media in their native language in real time. This was initially an idea from our director at EBU's Technology Innovation, Antonio Archidiacono, who had this crazy idea, as he often does, to allow a citizen to just consume public service media whenever they want to, on whatever device they want to, in their own native language. So the original vision was one of, for instance, you're driving across Europe in your expensive German car, and you're able to consume the local news content of the country that you're traveling through on your car radio in real time. So news briefings, podcasts, entertainment. You can switch it to your own native language, and you can understand that perfectly. As I kind of alluded to, that's really important when you're talking about immigrant populations and different speakers moving across Europe. actually integrating them, plugging them into the local news of the country that they're in is very important. And obviously, with many refugees across Europe right now, that's vitally important. And really, it's around opening up PSM content, which is vital for European society to be able to be consumed as widely as possible. And really, the real-time thing is the challenge. Is how can we make that as immediate, as quick, as on demand as possible, without having to do so much work beforehand to pre-prepare content? What can we automate? What can we do on demand? How can we improve this technology so that while humans are in the loop, I can consume any piece of content I want to from across Europe in my own language? So I'd just like to explain a little bit more about what it is, how it works, and also some of the applications that we use it for. And there is not just me talking, you'll be glad to hear. There is a little video that Joel, very grateful, helped me produce, which demonstrates a specific use case where we're doing things like speech-to-speech translation. So being able to revoice content in a language with a voice that sounds very realistic in my mind. So just a quick thing. EuroVOX is a project of a couple of parts, not too many, I would say 3. Really the foundation of that, the building block, the Lego brick, is the EuroVOX core, which is around being able to provide simple integration of different vendors, different tools, different technologies. The one thing I'm quite careful in saying is that EuroVOX generally is not there to do fundamental research. It's not there to create its own language models. It's not there to explore the latest research from universities talking about different unique ways in doing translation. It's there to exploit. It's there to exploit languages and technologies and platforms and commercial vendors that already exist, but making it easy to use them, switch between them, and to take the complexity out of using them. So many of you will be familiar with services from AWS and OpenAI is the recent competitor, but Microsoft Azure, Google. In Europe, we have some specialists like Speechmatics, DeepL. Putting those all in one place, making those easy to use, taking away the different ways, the different specificities you integrate with them. So essentially, the EuroVOX core is a single layer, a single API through which you can integrate with these different vendors. So EuroVOX takes care of the complexity in a certain way, different ways in which they talk, the different languages in which they talk, the different ways in which you interface, allowing you to focus on creating great content with that or defining your own workflows without having to worry about individual vendors. So the question that sometimes comes up, but less so nowadays, is, well, why do I bother switching between vendors? Why do I need to think about using more than one company? Well, of course, some of these companies have particular language supports, for instance. Some of them don't. Some of them, and something that I always go on about, is that the quality, the functionality of these vendors change rapidly on a 3 to 6 month basis. So while 1 month, for instance, one particular vendor is great at doing Spanish transcriptions, or it's got a great voice for doing German, in 6 months' time, that will change. There will be a competitor. Someone else will have replaced them. And we've seen that recently with OpenAI's Whisper, which has really revolutionized the world of transcription of speech to text. It's really shook that up. And the quality improvement is an order of magnitude, really about what I think of what we were seeing before. So being able to plug those into EuroVOX core transparently and access those has been really vital to us internally. Is the EBU. It means that we're able to dynamically and quickly switch between different vendors based on a certain use case to take advantage, for instance, if they support a new language, which we saw at the beginning of last year with Ukrainian, but also to offer to our members the ability to access multiple different language tools and vendors to do their own comparison, to do their own work, and to switch between them as and when they want to. So I just wanted to explain really the point of why we're putting these vendors all in one house. But of course, APIs, access to different vendors is interesting, but what we really want to do is to provide tools and services to our members. So this is why we have EuroVOX Studio, which used to be called the tool, but Studio is a much better name. And this is really a user-facing web-based tool to give users full control over a workflow that includes transcription, translation, subtitling, voice synthesis, everything above and beyond that. It's a one-stop shop for really transforming your media, making your media multilingual. And it's meant for non-technical users. It's meant to be intuitive. It's meant to take care of the complexity of these processes as best we can. It's also meant to be AI assistive. So that means that we acknowledge that AI technologies for transcription and translation can get you should we say, 95% along the way. But there will always be, if we want great quality, there will always be a need for humans to be in the loop. So those of you who have played with transcription and translation technologies will know some of the limitations. Translations, for instance, they're good. I can understand translations, but they're not how a native speaker would say things. Sometimes certain idioms or phrases get translated literally, so that means wrong. So the EuroVOX Studio provides a place where humans can go in and they can go and easily and quickly tweak those transcriptions or translations. They can go in and change the timings. They can change the sentence structure. We've recently added features where we can do speaker recognition, and you can change the speaker that it's assigned it to if it's got that wrong. So you can really start to build up a workflow that lets AI do most of the heavy lifting, and then humans come in and then just polish the end of it. And one of the things that I think is important, and I know this is appreciated by our members and others, is that this is not just a standalone utility, a tool. We know that there are certain commercial competitors that, should we say, sit on their own. You import content into them, you do your work, and then you export out. And they're very good tools. The one thing that we wanted to make for EuroVOX Studio is that it is designed to be integrated directly into an existing workflow. It's designed to be transparently part of your existing workflow, and we demonstrated that with some other tools and workflows that we've done internally in the EBU. Namely, one of them is the news pilot, which I'll mention briefly at the end. Users think that it's part of that tool. They don't see that as something separate. So we find that very valuable in saying that this is something that our members and others, for instance, can transparently embed inside their own workflows, their own existing workflows, with their own authentication schema, with even their own technology. And I think I've got a little example here, if I can just step through this. So one example is, for instance, a social media workflow. The idea is that, for example, you have your own incoming content workflow, which is something that you'd like to publish on social media. For instance, you'd like to, say, subtitle that for putting on Facebook, because I think young people appreciate words more than audio these days, or they want to view things in the background or on trains, etc. The idea is that you can automatically push that content directly from your workflow into the EuroVOX system. You can say to EuroVOX, please give me a transcription and then give me a translation in one or more languages, and then give me back a link with which my editors can go in and edit that if they really want to. So it's a direct, deep link into the EuroVOX Studio, which gives you the interface to allow you to go in and absolutely change whatever you want to do to correct things. Out of the back of that, you then say, well, instance, my users have corrected that, they verified that, they've done all the work they need to do. I want to then finalize that and publish that directly onto the eventual platform. So, for instance, again, Facebook. So the idea is that they will be presented with a publish button. And that's something simple. So it focuses them on the workflow. It focuses them on taking a piece of work that has been AI transcribed and translated, already set up with a profile that you want to. So Spanish, German, French, for instance. You then go in and you make those corrections and you click one button to then publish that. So that pushes that back into your own workflow to set it up to be published into, again, the social media platforms. That's just a concrete example of the sorts of things that we wanted to do. That's in use now, again, by some of our external tools. That can be useful for even archival workflows where you need to bulk process content and then focus in on a few key pieces for later publishing. We think this is a really valuable part of the EuroVOX system. Another part which is quite interesting and becoming more and more important, it's taking up more and more of my time, something we've run with for a while, but now I think we've really got a good groove into, which is what we call currently EuroVOX Live. So it's around actually applying real-time transcription technologies. So those of you who've used these platforms, these tools, will know that file-based transcription is a different beast to real-time transcription. Some of you may be playing with using AI-based real-time transcription for subtitling. I know some of our members have been doing that for some years, which I always thought was very brave to just put this basic on air. We know that audiences appreciate this. If it's a service that hasn't been provided before, we know that it's appreciated to have something there rather than nothing. So EuroVOX Live is around multilingual captioning. I'm just going to break now because Joel has flagged to me that we have a question. I love questions. So Joel, why don't you fire over the question?
Yeah, the question comes from Wim, and Wim asks, what about crowdsourcing the educational content? As it's very hard to check all different languages, could it be possible to use students to gather feedback and update the content based on that?
Maybe I'll just address that question first then. So I think collaborative editing is definitely something that we want to do, and it's on our roadmap. So we envisaged, again, going back to the archival workflow, you have teams of people that will be responsible for different languages. And again, we have that inside of our membership, for instance. Vatican Radio is an organization that translates content into about 40 different languages. So it's absolutely a part of our roadmap to try and find a way inside the studio to be able to let people simultaneously edit parts of the content in a way that may be familiar with users of Office 365 or Google Docs. Maya, do you want to talk about a bit more about that?
Well, just about the idea, that is definitely an interesting idea and one that we haven't tried. That's what I can say. But, thinking about how things change and how all the content becomes more voluminous every year, right? It is difficult for one single entity or a person or a team to manage everything. So I am a big proponent of such a project, but it is a project. It has to be initiated, and managed, and hopefully, that I'm going to put that on my roadmap for next year to consider.
Benjamin and Maya, correct me if I'm wrong here, but EuroVOX also does the translation in real time, right?
Yes.
So you feed an audio signal into it, and what comes out is the language of choice, depending on what languages are available.
Yes, if I may say something, Ben. So at the last EBU meeting, Ben sent us a link to test the live transcription, so we could see the room. And then on your local device, you can choose which language you want to see the narration in, and it translates as people are speaking on the stage. So it is real time, for sure. We are not at this moment considering the real-time translation. Maybe for our conference next year, that will be really a valuable benefit. It would be a benefit to people, for people who come, from other regions of the world and don't necessarily speak English fluently. We have had people, even speakers in the past, who were not fluent in English. So that would be really helpful for them.
Very good, thank
you. Exactly. As Maya mentioned it again, and I was starting to say this, this is something we dug into, we started to dig into, and we did a not even a demonstration, a trial of this at one of our events in June, our EBU Technical Assembly in Vienna. So we tried this out for real. David from SMPTE was there, and it actually worked, which is quite a miracle. Not a miracle. I was very pleased that it worked. We knew it would work. But it was actually, I think the most important thing for me, that, and I can talk about it in a bit more detail in my slides later on, is that we proved that people appreciated something like that. We took a punt that actually the user experience we wanted to, the actual functionality we wanted to do, was something that was appreciated. And Maya mentioned there that I think I can't point to strong research, but I think we are obliged to, as organizations where members speak more than just English, to provide that content, both real-time and file-based, and anything, really, documents, PowerPoint, Word documents, in multiple languages in a way that they can consume. And that's the only way in which we as organizations can reach more people, because otherwise we're reaching really just this purpose.
Thank you for answering.
It was a good question. Thanks, Wim. So as I mentioned, multilingual captioning. So this is kind of the dry view of this, but Maya kind of made a much better explanation of me. It's really around exploring workflows for live transcription and simultaneous translation. So what we tried in Vienna, which I mentioned, and sadly I don't have a video, but I do have some pictures and I have people's reactions and statistics as well, is we had an event that was presented largely in English. And during that event, delegates were able to view the real-time, so word-by-word transcription of the English that was being spoken, and then sentence-by-sentence translations in a range of different languages. So we're able to do around 150 different possible languages from English at least. But what we did was we offered an additional 30 languages, including some that you'd expect. So French, German, Italian, Spanish. I basically picked the languages of all the members that would be attending. So we had things like Finnish. We had things like Greek, for instance. We had things like Arabic, because we have a number of Arabic-speaking members. But I also wanted to be a bit more daring, and I also picked Welsh, which is my familial language, and also Romansh, which is a language that is the official language of Switzerland, where we're based, which is spoken by, I think, around 30 to 50,000 people, and is not a language that is provided by a commercial platform. So this was really to demonstrate that actually, again, having multiple different vendors plugged into one system is really valuable, because then we can pick and choose who does the translation, provide a wider range of languages. For those who might be asking the obvious question, well, where do you actually get this translation from? Our Romansh-speaking member in Switzerland, RTR, was kind enough to provide us with the platform that they created. They've actually created their own translation models. Anyway, so this trial was a really interesting one, because it allowed us to have a real event where we were able to take a feed from the desk, run that through a real-time transcription engine, and then really test assumptions on how that would work in terms of a workflow. And it was a lot harder than we thought. I like to describe it as having different plates spinning at one time, because the real-time transcription doesn't necessarily line to a sentence, doesn't necessarily come in the form that you think it might. Also, as people speak, the transcription engine doesn't really have a clue of context. It's kind of dumb, but after a certain amount of time, it will gather context. It will work out what you're trying to say. So that means it will make its own corrections. So as you see a sentence being spoken, you will see in real time, dynamically, previous words that it thought it got right being corrected. And towards the end of a sentence, it will then have a much better context. The sentence will be much more accurate to what was actually being said, such that you can't really just keep on adding words to real-time transcription. You really need to do some work in finding out where is the truth in the actual thing that's being said. So I don't go too deep into that, but it's basically like plate spinning. And we can only do translation based on a complete sentence. And a complete sentence doesn't necessarily come as quickly as you think it might do. Now, why do we need a complete sentence? Because translation engines, translation technologies really work on complete sentences. They can do less than that. But again, you're missing the context and the results will not be as good. And translation is only ever as good as the transcription. So to get the best quality, so that the audience, the delegate, can actually read that and not be confused, we decided to wait for a complete sentence to be transcribed. And some of you may have seen alternative ways of doing this. For instance, in I think Teams and Google Meet have these functionalities now. But this was something that we wanted to try to see how well it worked. And actually, we think it worked really well. And the feedback that we got was really quite appreciated. And this is to prove I'm not just lying. This is me, I think, sitting behind David Grindler of SMPTE, watching this in actual real time. Being translated into French. And I could see audience members viewing this. I could see audience members whose English wasn't very good using this throughout the entire event. So I think this is something that is quite valuable for events. And while we at the EBU, we do tend to have human interpreters for our big events at the very least, the number of languages we can provide is limited for whatever resource reasons. This is a way in which, again, we can have 30 plus languages or even more for each and every delegate to at least get that in words, and maybe even to take away a transcription for their colleagues at the very end in their native languages. So this is something I think is quite exciting, and I'm getting more and more requests from members whether we can help them with real-time captioning in multiple different languages in different ways. So I was told by Joel that the audience here really likes flow diagrams. So I thought I'd include one at the very least. This is one flow diagram. It shows how we set this up. It's quite a good link because we actually use an AJ Hello Plus encoder box. Great box, worked really well. Solid, worked throughout the entire 2 days. So maybe this is an advert for them, but really pleased that it actually worked. We use that box to feed the desk through to our cloud-based cluster, which then coordinated with a range of different tool vendors. We then package that back up and serve that directly back to our delegates' mobile phones or computers or tablets or whatever they had to. And actually, again, that was a good test to see whether people would have used the second screen experience, and that actually worked really quite well. And maybe that'll even work well for broadcast services where broadcasters are required to serve many different languages. Again, something to explore in the next 6 months, I think. So moving on from the real time, I wanted to move back to some of the file-based stuff. And I mentioned this as a use case, and it's really the biggest use case we have right now. It's a project called NewsPilot, and it's quite a fantastic project. And hats off to my colleagues, especially Sebastian Noir, who manages this. It's something that a large number of our members have bought into. I don't remember the exact number of members, but I think it's around 25 plus. Big public service broadcasters who have said, we want to push content into a shared system. So nearly 3,000 news stories every day, up to 2 million articles translated so far since I think the start of last year. A lot of which includes video, audio media from, again, some big public service brands, pushing that content in and having that all transcribed and translated into a range of different languages. The purposes of which is then to republish that on others' websites. So essentially it gives you literally a European perspective, which is what Video Europe means in English, a European perspective on what different broadcasters are saying. So someone in France, someone in Germany can see what Portuguese are talking about, what the Finnish are talking about, what the Ukrainians are talking about, what the Greeks are talking about in their own native language. News content gets ingested, translated, and republished in the native language of the audience. And this has been a huge success, I think. And this is fantastic because it means that the barriers of language comprehension for news, vitally important for citizens, is being broken. And it's being broken by public service media broadcasters. It's not being broken by third parties who aggregate and then recommend whatever content they want to others. This is led by public service broadcasters, by journalists, by content editors, by real experts in the content to actually say, yes, we think this is an accurate translation. Yes, we want to republish this. So this to me is it's finding the exciting uses of these technologies. It's finding the workflows, getting journalists and content editors and real educators involved in using some of these quite technical tools. And that's really what really gets me to wake up every morning. And I'm really grateful for the team that we have in the EBU and my colleagues as well for really having a good collaboration. And I'm grateful to SMPTE for this collaboration in really exploring what can be done for education. And I look forward to what we can do in the future. Back to you, Joel.
You had mentioned previously that you sent a couple of examples of the translation tool in action. Would now be an appropriate time to do the demo?
You're quite right to remind me because you're the one that put this video together, John. I'm very grateful for that. So just a quick intro. We haven't talked much about voice synthesis, but what we do as well is revoice. So we do voice-to-voice translation. The technology for this has really gone in leaps and bounds, and we're doing some experimentation with a new provider called 11 Labs, a US-based company, I believe. Maybe they're not European actually. Anyway, they have very good quality voices. So what I've done is just done a few snippets of myself speaking at IBC in Amsterdam last year, revoiced into different languages. And again, thanks, Joel, for putting this together.
There are two synthesizing your voice, and then the third one is a virtual voice.
Yeah, exactly. So voice cloning technology is something that's known by probably a lot of people here. But I cloned my own voice from about a minute's worth of audio from the original video this was taken. So it maintains a lot of the same artifacts. And it sounds quite like me. I think probably in future it'll sound a lot more like me. But we really want to explore voice cloning, especially to really try and get accurate voice-to-voice translation from an original news clip, for instance, to really sound like the original newsreader. As you mentioned, there's a final voice, which is a pre-made one. And pre-made ones, obviously, they sound higher quality. But they're obviously not my voice, but it's just to make a comparison between the two. So I think it's in French and Spanish.
Very good. Let's say they're just 3 quick clips. So let's take a look.
I'm demonstrating the EuroVOX project, which is the EBU's collaborative project to create an open toolbox for language tools and services. Je présente le projet EuroVOX de l'UR, qui vise à créer une boîte à outils ouverte pour les technologies linguistiques, for language tools and services.
Estoy demostrando el proyecto EuroVOX de la UER, que trabaja para crear una caja de herramientas abierta para las tecnologías.
And that last one was, I think the name was Joseph. Joseph.
His name was Motive, yeah. I think that was probably a dialect of Spanish. My Spanish isn't very good, unfortunately. But I mean, again, this has been leaping forward. So this was only ever available in English and a few other languages, and it's now being rolled out into additional languages. And the whole area of voice cloning technologies, of being able to seem like I speak another language, that's going to be transformative for media, and both a very exciting time, but quite a frightening time, I guess, especially in the world of deepfakes. I think it's something that we can't avoid, and it's something that we have to harness because it's so useful for audiences, for the people that consume our content.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring Maya back up on the screen, and I'll come back on the screen as well. Quick question. I've noticed with other manual translation tools, not ones that involve humans, but sentence structure is different between languages. Now, I can only speak to English, but when I've used Google Translate and sent a message off to someone who speaks Spanish and received some kind criticism, let's say. How does the tool handle sentence structure?
So I guess the easiest thing to say is it's not magic. The technology, as I mentioned right now, it will have faults. So machine learning based translations is exactly that. It's machine learning. It learns off parallel text in different languages with enough quantity, and I'm talking huge quantities like maybe Google has access to, you can approach good quality. There are some newer techniques for making better translations, but essentially the techniques are roughly the same. So there's some things that we can do and there's some things that we can't do. And I think this is really where the assistive nature of the tools come forward, which is a human can get involved, and it's about making that as easy as possible. You're right in that tools like Google Translate, they can sometimes mangle up the sentence and slightly change the context. And I've seen some good examples of this. But again, this is going to improve. So I think we have to leverage these tools, but we also have to make sure that it's easy for humans to at least identify when there are problems there. And we can do that with, for instance, doing benchmarking and looking at confidence of different translations, but also just making sure that there are workflows in place so that people who do speak those languages can at least verify them at the end of the day. At this time, there's not really much more that we can do.
Understood. We do have a question from Yi Gong, and forgive me if I mispronounced the second name. What's the delay to process this in the live broadcast environment?
It's interesting if it's the same Egon that I think it is. So it depends really. The parameters are, if you want a low latency, you sacrifice quality. So you can get very good quality, for instance, with a latency of around, should we say 5 to 10 seconds. We had a latency of, I think, around 3 seconds at the event we did, and the quality was as good. It was as good as I expected it to be. And I remember from some years ago that that's still a lot less than the latency that we had. So I think we were talking about 7 to 10 seconds was a good latency for most of these activities. A couple of seconds is probably what I'd expect for word-to-word transcription. But again, as I mentioned, if you're then doing translations, you need to wait to the end of the sentence. And that really depends on how long that person drags out a sentence. So if it was me speaking, for instance, that would be at least 10 to 20 seconds.
And you said this is a new tool, so it's bound to get better. It's bound to get better.
Assume that these technologies will just get better and better and better. I mean, there will be a technology coming up. I know that Google have dabbled in this, others have as well, which doesn't go through speech to text, text to text, text to speech, for instance. It does purely it does voice to voice, speech to speech translation direct. And I know that we're seeing this popping up now in really interesting ways. That's where the low latency will come in. It's not appropriate to everything, but I think that'll be where we have, for instance, really real-time AI-based translation that can happen, should we say, directly in your ear using a pair of headphones.
Sure. I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but please, if it's just say, I don't know, Joel. What language is the most challenging for the tool to translate? Do you know?
German's always an interesting language. I mean, I'm no linguist, but I know that German comes with challenges. So I think the Germans like to leave their verb until the very end, which means that you don't get much of a context. I'm going to get a kicking from a German speaker now. You don't tend to get a lot of context until the very end. I know that when I first started out with this, Finnish was a challenge. And I think that was purely based on the fact that there wasn't much interest in Finnish, because at that time, smart speakers weren't being sold in Finnish, because that's what drove some of the technology development. I'm told that's a lot better now. Again, going back to the Romansh example, really no one else but Romansh speakers were going to put effort into making a language model for Romansh. That's a challenge as well. I think there should be a lot more focus on serving, should we say, minority languages that aren't that interesting to commercial companies. That's a key place that I think associations and public service broadcasting can really fulfill, because they have an obligation to reach these languages that others don't really care about too much.
Is there a way for individuals or organizations to help develop these underrepresented languages? How would one support creating or improving the models for these underserved languages?
So this, I guess, the simplistic answer, this isn't the gift of anyone. Of course, if you're looking at a translation model that needs at least 60 million parallel sentences, I think I'm getting that right, at least a large number, more than I can knock out in a weekend, you need some kind of automation. So the power of Google and Meta are that they can access huge amounts of data on the internet, huge amounts of resources. What makes the quality so good. That isn't always available to the normal public. With that being said, there are a range of different open source engines, tools, techniques, data sets that are really, really quite useful. And I really am excited at some of the open source tools. You mentioned Egon. I don't know if it's the same Egon, but I know that in the Netherlands, they had really quite interesting effort to create a Dutch-specific transcription models. At that time, support for Dutch was quite poor. So the broadcasters, industry, the government banded together, I think I'm getting this right, to really do some research into this. So I think cross-industry efforts like that can really push some of these things forward and actually make it possible to create own language models. It can provide the scale to create your own language models, but doing it on your own is quite tricky.
Understood. Thank you. We don't have any additional questions. Maya, do you and Benjamin have any points that you'd like to make collaboratively? Will this tool be at IBC?
Yes, I will be at IBC. I'm flying there tomorrow. I think, Maya, you won't be able to join us, but I know that some of your colleagues might be.
Yes, I will not be joining, but you are going, Ben, and you will actually speak within one of the SMPTE sessions about this tool and spread the word about what we are doing. And there will be SMPTE representatives at IBC, of course, because SMPTE is, as a part of owner of IBC, will have a booth at the ownership of Partners Pavilion. So feel free to come and talk to our representatives, everybody. So I want to say one more thing is that SMPTE is considering increasing the this collaboration with EBU. If everything goes well, eventually we might work with EBU to develop this tool that will become a member benefit for SMPTE members as well. Now that is a long-term project. It does depend on the funding, and it will have to be a development project. So it's probably not likely that we'll see that happening in the next year, maybe two, but we are thinking of making it available to SMPTE members as well, just like an EBU member can now log in and translate the content that they need into their own language. We are hopeful that SMPTE member can log into SMPTE and translate their education materials into their own language and then consume them. Just an idea at this point, but we're going to try to make it happen.
Just my point, I think that's a very good idea. We like collaborations. I think we're stronger together as an EBU membership, as an industry, working together rather than reinventing the wheel. And yeah, just thank you for reminding me I'm doing the IBC session on Monday, Maya. Also, I will be demonstrating this at our stand, I think is in Hall 10. So if you're there, IBC, come and say hi. I can show you more detail how this works. We can show some of the things we do in SMPTE. Always great to have conversations on how we can do collaborations in future.
Good. Well, there are no questions. Sometimes they say when the story's over, the story's over. Any final comments, any final thoughts that you want to share before we close for today?
I want to thank everybody for listening to this webcast today. And again, your thoughts, your feedback is always welcome. Feel free to reach out to us through the survey link or directly. Education receives public emails at the email address education@simpte.org. So if you have anything to tell us, please reach out, and we are happy to always, consider new, such as crowdsourcing, for example. Like that is an interesting idea. If we ever get to build, hopefully we will, a knowledge library for SMPTE education, and then use the translation tool to make it available to everybody. That's going to be really, really a great effort. Really great, a great achievement as well.
100%. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and talk and share this as well.
Very good. Let's see. Wim says, great session. We will pick it up at IBC. Maya, Benjamin, thank you for covering this. Again, I think it's a very important tool because English has always been the more traditional language for engineering. And I think this is an opportunity, again, to help the world, develop in their own language, to learn in their own language. So very, very, very important to inclusivity. So Maya, Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Ben.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'd also like to thank our guests for attending. We'll do a little bit of light editing on the video because I'm sure I made a little finger slip here or there with the button. But we'll also provide a PDF. Probably within the next day, you'll receive an email with a link asking for your feedback. And in exchange for that feedback, you will receive a PDF of the slides that were used today. For those of you that are traveling to IBC, please hope your travels are safe first and comfortable second. I hope they're both. But please make the most of that learning opportunity. It's a great conference. And go say hi to Benjamin. He's going to be there. So thank you to everybody. And with that, I would like to close with please cherish the moments you have with your family, your loved ones, and your friends. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.